such an important topic that I think having this virtually will actually go to all of our benefit, because there's so much great information that we really want to share, and hopefully all of you will have some good insight into what our economy is looking like 1 year into the pandemic after we get through this program. So before we get started, I first just want to recognize and thank our sponsor, People's Credit Union. They have been wonderful sponsors of this Economic Update series for several years now. This is the first one that we're having in 2021. We do anticipate having another one in June, as well as 2 more for the rest of the year. So it's a quarterly update series, and hopefully we'll be back in person again fairly soon. But thank you again for joining us, and thank you to People's Credit Union. And with that, we do have a quick message from our sponsor.
You choose your own course, set your own pace. You have your own unique story. We get that, and our community succeeds when we work together. We're People's Credit Union, and we've been about people helping people since we first opened our doors in 1922. For us, it's not about transactions. It's about getting to know you and your needs, and doing what we can to help move your story forward. That's what credit unions do. We serve our members and our communities, and that drives our every action, every single day. At People's Credit Union, we're dedicated to solutions that work for you. That means building strong ties and doing what's right for our neighbors. It also means keeping your best interest at heart through every decision we make. Because what matters most is lifting all boats, working together towards a greater good. At People's, you're more than just a member. You belong here and always will.
Can't get that one.
So thank you all. And again, thank you to People's Credit Union, and Bill DeWitt, I see, is here, who is now on our board of directors. Thank you so much, Bill, for the continued relationship and support.
It's our pleasure, Erin. Thank you.
Thank you. And so just to get the program started, I would like to remind everyone to keep your microphone on mute, and we will kick off the program in just a moment. So before we start, I just wanted to give some background on the relationship that the Chamber has with Fourth Economy, and we'll be hearing from Rich Overmoyer shortly. So several years ago, the Chamber embarked on an initiative with all of the municipalities throughout the Greater Newport region, along with the Van Buren Foundation and some of our private sector partners throughout the region. And we pulled together because we recognized that our voices and our efforts were more impactful when we started to work together. So as far as economic development goes, all of our communities and the main larger institutions on the island recognize that we aren't competing with each other, that we truly will do better as we work together from a regional perspective when it comes to economic development. And with that, we started Connect Greater Newport. Connect Greater Newport is this public-private partnership and a regional economic development division of the Chamber. And we contract with Fourth Economy to collect a lot of the data that you're going to see today, and to develop a business outreach program, as well as a long-term strategy. So today, we'll talk about the state of the economy 1 year into the pandemic, but also how we responded. So my partners in this initiative helped to pull together, and we developed a task force called Restore Greater Newport. My partners are from Discover Newport, Synedia, Rhode Island Marine Trades Association, Polaris MEP, and the Rhode Island Hospitality Association. And I see a lot of my colleagues on the call today, and I appreciate them joining us. But we recognized when COVID hit that our region was going to be impacted pretty significantly. It was at the beginning of the start of last year's season for us. Our seasonal economy starts in the time. And when that happened, we recognized that we needed to come together because all all of our industries are integrated so significantly. And while some were more hurt than others, as a region, we need each of those sectors to do well because we're so integrated, and we should not look at things siloed. So I can't thank my partners at Restore Greater Newport from all of those different entities enough. But it's really been a wonderful experience to be meeting on a weekly basis to talk about those short-term, midterm, and long-term goals for the organization and for the region, for what we need to do to create a more resilient economy. And Rich has been there every step of the way. So thank you so much to Rich, who is the CEO of Fourth Economy and the project manager for Connect Greater Newport, for pulling us all together on a weekly basis, but also driving a lot of the activity that we have done and that we will be doing into the future based on you, the work of you and your team in collecting this data so that we know where to go. Where we're coming from is going to be really important for us to determine how we move forward. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Rich Overmoyer. Welcome, Rich. Thank you again for all the work that you've done. And we look forward to this really in-depth presentation on our local economy.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin. I really appreciate that. And as you know, we really appreciate the partnership with you, with your organization, with you individually, and certainly with the rest of the partners, which I see many on the screen here today. So we really, we value this relationship and the partnership that we've had. We want to do our best to help the region recover from, what has been a pretty horrible year overall. But, certainly I think we're seeing some opportunity ahead. I'm going to share my screen now to share some slides. And then I'm happy to answer any questions too as we go on, but also we'll leave my contact information so that you have that. Let me just make sure you can see my slides now. And yeah, it should be good to go, right? Any thumbs up, Erin? Yeah, great. Okay. So as we were thinking about, today's conversation, I think we really, thought about this idea of a road to recovery and resilience. Our agenda for the slides, I kind of have two parts that they're kind of split into. One is just looking at the economy, both, a little bit of pre-pandemic, because it's important to think of what we had in terms of a base and assets, but then obviously thinking about this year of loss and adaptation. And then again, to Erin's point, thinking about economic resilience going forward. So a couple of things, to think about. One is, as if we look historically, we've been through various recessions, nothing, of course, like what we've experienced this year, but it's important to think about how the region fared. And so this chart shows you sort of where we were pre the Great Recession. Obviously, the decline here is what we went through during the recession, the green being the Greater Newport region. Yeah, and so in terms of this presentation, Greater Newport is Newport County and Bristol County, which is how we think about with the Connect Greater Newport and the initiative. And so we saw, the region was hit pretty hard during the recession, obviously, largely travel and tourism because of the financial crisis that was happening. We did see a good rebound and some slow growth over time, consistent growth over time in the region. Obviously, what we had in 2020, you see this pronounced dip, obviously, in the economy. And I'll talk more, I'll give you a closer focus on what we've been seeing over the last year. But it tells us that, we can hopefully get back to at least that slow growth, but we also want to see even a stronger economy going forward and coming out of the recession that's happening now. We did see prior that wages were growing in the region. So again, you see, doing better than the state in terms of the wages that are present, which obviously creates, opportunity for investment for both businesses to benefit from that, but also obviously individual households. And certainly part of the reason as we've looked at this is the well-educated workforce. I think people, this looks at folks with a bachelor's or higher, and you see significantly higher than the United States and in Rhode Island. So, folks, businesses are looking to grow, having a well-educated workforce is one of the key variables that they do look at. And so we think that provides some strength, obviously, that we can leverage in the future. And, we know that jobs, I think, but this kind of shows you sort of the concentration, 30% or so of the jobs in the region are in government or healthcare, an additional 27% in the food, accommodation, and retail space, which as we know, over the past year has been, significantly impacted and continues to be impacted now. But you see other strength areas in terms of professional and technical services, manufacturing, some of that obviously related to defense sector and other industries that we've seen some growth and strength in the region. So here's that closer look at what what we've been through over the past year. Coming into the last year, so in February, we had pretty low unemployment rates. In fact, in the region, lower than the state by a couple percentage, couple decimal points there. I think as you've seen the trend overall, obviously with the closure issues that we saw in the March, April timeframe, you saw this spike of unemployment at both the region and state level, with the region again being higher, 2 percentage points higher. And then it's kind of been a little bit of a roller coaster. I mean, you can tell when we hit the second wave in the summer, and there were some additional restrictions placed on operating environment for businesses. And then you see sort of this gradually going down. Certainly in the region as the tourism season, there was some saving of the tourism season towards the end of last year. So you saw this decrease happening, but then again, as the winter months came on, as folks work through their things like the payroll protection program and other sort of economic mitigation efforts, you saw an uptick again in unemployment. And where we are right now, I think folks are predicting that we're going to have some economic issues nationally, and we think it's true in the region, at least for the next year to 2 years, before we fully get back to probably where we were economically prior to the pandemic setting in. One of the other things that we're closely watching, because it happened also in the last recession, is a decrease in the labor force participation rate. So when people opt out, they're no longer actively looking for a job and collecting unemployment. They've just given up or have decided to make the decision that they can afford based on what other income in their household, that they're not actively looking for work. That creates if that continues, and that's not just a region, it's a national issue we're seeing, that could be a problem as the economy starts getting back to where it was, in that there were labor force shortages in some sectors overall, even prior to this. And we're seeing anecdotally in certain categories, we're seeing that kind of impact even today. And I'll share with you some reasons why we think that's happening. One of the key areas, I think women in the workforce have been impacted more during this cycle than we've ever seen. And there's a couple reasons for that. I mean, one is if you look at the concentration of where women are working in the region, they're in those areas that have been impacted. So jobs in accommodation and food, 55% female, 80% of jobs in healthcare and social assistance, 64% education. So, these are areas where there's a majority of women in the workforce. These are the essential industries that have at times put workers' health at risk during the pandemic. And so there have been some choices that women have had to make to step back from their employment because of the risk factors that they were feeling, or obviously in jobs in accommodation and food because of the restrictions on operations. Others, though, we do see similar majorities in areas that can have remote work. So 68% of the jobs in management, 58% in finance and insurance are currently held by women in the region. And so there's an opportunity there, but the challenge, as we've all known, is, if you're a working mother and have children at home, I think the difficulty that we've experienced in the last year, that's created a lot of stress that I think it's going to be a while before we can recover from that, and before we understand sort of how better to deal with that over the long term. Some other things that we worry about because of that, those discrepancies in terms of the women in the workforce, I think that the other issue that we've seen in the region is just the wage levels, the difference. Partly we look at these things because as we think about recovery, I think there's some areas that we need to focus on to make sure that there is more of a parity in terms of pay, because I think that's where when you're making a decision about staying in the workforce or leaving, I think it does come down to dollars and cents in a household. And so more of an equity in terms of the wage rates is going to be important to think about in the future. We do see overall too that labor force participation, again, that's something we're watching closely. I think, first of all, women's labor force participation was lower than men even before the pandemic. And that's kind of across the board here in terms of, as you see in these comparisons. But what we're watching nationally, and we're starting to try to work on data in the region, but nationally, 2.3 million women have exited the labor force since February of 2020. And especially you see this significant drop towards the end of last year, that 275,000 left the labor force in January alone. And so it's drastically lowering the labor force participation rate. I think what we're all trying to figure out is is that the long-term trend? Is that a 6 month, is that a 6 year, issue that we're going to be dealing with? Because it could have tremendous impacts on, as you see where women are in those sectors, it could have tremendous impacts on the labor force issues that firms in those sectors are dealing with going forward. And we've seen some areas in terms of, obviously tourism's been significantly impacted. This is kind of an eye chart, but I'll explain to you, and happy to share these with anybody later on. But you see here that, the top, basically this ranks from order of impact. So obviously accommodation and food, arts, entertainment, retail being the top 3 sectors there. And you see how many workers are currently in the region. And what we've done is kind of take a look at, is that, one sort of impact such as the closure order, is that multiple things that have happened. And so in those, you see that there have been multiple impacts that are occurring. And we know that there are over 16,000 workers in the region that work in those significantly impacted industries. And over 7,000 directly support the tourism, or supported by tourism spending in Newport and Bristol County. And so we know, obviously, we know that we've seen these impacts, but this kind of puts some granularity around sort of the numbers of people that have been negatively impacted over the past year. And whether that's a short-term or long-term impact, I think still remains to be seen. But we know that obviously their lives have been impacted, and it's something that we've got to focus on going forward. We also know with all this data that, it is very much a region. So this is one cut of commuting flows. And so it shows that of the jobs that are currently in Newport County, so employers in Newport County, 50.5% of those jobs are held by Newport County residents. So they live in any of the communities there. But then you also see that means 49.5 are commuting from elsewhere. And so, Bristol County, Mass, with 3,000 people, obviously Providence, to over 2,800 people. So one of the things that it's important to think about is, as there have been these impacts on like the tourism, the retail sector in Newport County, it is impacting the broader region because of where people are those workflows, where people are commuting for work. A couple other areas that, just thinking about what was happening prior to COVID as well is, really thinking about, I think this past year we've seen, the significance of thinking about vulnerable workforce. So we define those as in a couple different ways. One is sort of people that are very part-time, maybe seasonal types of jobs, or people earning under $40,000. And so if you look here again, unfortunately, many of those jobs are in the areas that have been significantly impacted. And what that means is, like, you're seeing the ramifications that in terms of people not being able to pay rent or mortgages, their utility costs, things like that. And so, I think one of the things I think going forward is we do need to think about, not just in the region, but obviously even nationally, is thinking about the wage levels and really, are people on the edge that you see one disruption and they're immediately into the social service system, or, we saw immediately the first 2 weeks of the pandemic, people rushing to their food banks because they basically on average, people have $400 in savings in this category of worker. And so it's something that we've got to think about for the future. Yeah, this kind of just talks, this is at the state level, but it kind of shows you a little bit more in terms of like, what is that profile? And so you see here that, 2/3 of the jobs are full-time, but again, there's this large segment of jobs that are what we would consider vulnerable, and we need to think about in the future. And yeah, this is just a further breakdown to spell that out. I think the bottom line overall in the state, this bottom statistic here that equates to 272,000 workers. So 54% of all jobs have vulnerability. So hopefully, I think we're beyond sort of the significant economic disruption, but, if future disruptions, we need to think about these individuals and these workers and the businesses that employ them, because again, they're at risk for the next economic disruption. And we want to try to create a more resilient focus for the future. So we need to think about these. A couple other things to note. One is, in the past year, there's been a drastic shift in consumer spending and very much focused. This line, the top little line there that you see the significant bump is durable goods. And so as we've all been home and, there is kind of been this K-shaped recovery, which a lot of folks are doing even better than they probably would have been in the past year. And, so they have disposable income and are buying durable goods, new cars, furniture, try to get a construction person to try to come and do some work around your home. It's just a lot of folks sort of investing in those areas. And obviously you've seen the dip. Sorry, I'm getting some, is that feedback or no, I guess somebody else. Okay. And then obviously you see the dip here in terms of food service, accommodation, other services. So I think, we think we're starting to see some leveling off of both of these, an increase obviously in food service and accommodation, and maybe people are done buying as many durable goods, but it's certainly from a good standpoint of some of the manufacturing, certainly the marine trades industry have seen the benefit of that. So we'll see. We think that's a trend that's probably going to continue maybe over the next year, and then we'll see that leveling off occur. So let me talk a little bit about the economic ecosystem, and as we think about what's needed there and what some of the impacts have been. So one area, again, back to households, people making decisions about work and their ability to work. I think one of the things we've seen is the impact on childcare. So even prior to the pandemic, we've seen this pretty significant gap in licensed childcare for children under 5 years of age. That gap doesn't mean that these kids aren't being cared for as their parents are at work. What it means is they're in other environments, so family, friends, neighbor care, unlicensed care, which a lot of folks, you would like to see a higher ratio of people in licensed and what is considered quality care. We would like to see a larger ratio of that in the future. And of course, what we've seen then is the impacts of the pandemic. We're estimating right now that there's about 1,500 seats of providers that have had to permanently close. And again, these are statewide numbers. It's hard, so far we haven't been able to get at these at the regional level, but it's something that we're trying to get at. But yeah, so you've seen, across the state, 1,500 seats that probably are lost at this point is based on the estimates. But we've also seen this decreased capacity right now of additional 1,200 or 12,000 seats throughout the state because of operating restrictions, providers just, curtailing hours or the number of folks that are there, or even some of the labor force challenges that we've seen in terms of people coming back into the workforce. And so that, as the economy starts heating up, this is a barrier, obviously, for workers across all income demographics and locations throughout the state. This is an issue that's going to have to be dealt with. And hopefully, there are some opportunities at the federal level to support additional revenue or investment here, but it remains to be seen how well that's going to fix this gap. One of the other things we've looked at in the ecosystem is the small business support. So one area that's easier to look at is really looking at small business lending. We saw the peak here is right prior to the recession, and then obviously, like, financial institutions were impacted significantly, and as well as businesses. You saw this significant decrease on the annual investment. So this is all the banks in the greater Newport region. And then you saw sort of this increase, but never getting back to where we were pre-recession. And so it does follow broader regional patterns, but it's concerning. And part of the question, I think, that be interesting to discuss is it a lack of resources, lack of available capital, or is it just a lack of entrepreneurship happening, that people are looking to grow their business or create new businesses and not applying for loans? But it does underscore that there was a higher peak as we saw the job opportunities happening back pre-recession. So somehow there's some in between here that I think we need to get to. We have seen some of the economic mitigation efforts at the state and federal, largely federally funded, but you see both here on the left, the Restore RI program, kind of what that did for the state and then for the region, with businesses in the region getting approximately $8.8 million. And then the payroll protection program, which has been the significant economic mitigation effort. And so you see in the region here, $229 million. I mean, so total 237 versus, if I show you that chart before, we were at 92 million in the most recent data that's available. So significant resources coming to the region, obviously, though, not necessarily to grow, but really to mitigate the impacts. And so it's something that we're trying to better understand and look at, like, what is the need in terms of, into 2021, 2022, in terms of what kind of loan capital is available once these economic grant programs are expended. What else are we going to need to help businesses grow back stronger? And the other part of the ecosystem is thinking about remote work. We all probably know folks, and many of us here right now are working remote, but we also probably know folks that have moved into the region because they can work and live anywhere. The greater Newport region, as you see on this map, it's kind of a heat map of concentrations of people that are able to work remotely. And so we estimate in the region close to 19,000 people, because of their occupation, are able to do remote work. And so it's been, obviously that's been the blessing for a lot of folks, is they were able to pivot and adapt quickly and maintain their income level as a result of that. And so you've got a pretty good workforce level in the region that's able to do that. Whoops. Somehow my chart, anyhow, my colors fell off my chart, but anyhow, this shows you sort of one of the things that we need to think about is the broadband infrastructure with that. And one of the things, some of the federal definitions of what's the speeds that you need for broadband are somewhat outdated, as we've all experienced, trying to have kids on, getting remote education on video, you trying to work on video, other things happening in the house is overwhelming many folks' systems. We do see that overall the region's got, on record as high internet speeds, but what we're seeing is that the reliability issues, cost issues, and even access issues for both businesses and individuals are still a barrier for many in the community. So it's something that I'll talk about that we're working on that area. The other thing is that on the ecosystem is housing. So, there's obviously significant economic impacts, as I mentioned, on workers, really creating the inability to pay rent, mortgage, and other utilities. There's been moratoriums at state and even at the federal level with the CDC that are now extended through June, that have sort of, we think, have masked the issue, that there's a lot of folks that have balances that they may never be able to recoup. And so that's something that we've got to look at, being aggressive about how do we look at that impact and mitigate any loss of households, either through rent evictions or through mortgage foreclosures. We knew going into the pandemic that 49% of the greater Newport households were cost burdened. That means that household's paying more than 30% of their median income on housing. And so any kind of disruption, loss of a paycheck, even for a week or 2 weeks, is enough to throw them over the edge because of that. And so that's something that, again, going forward, we need to look at. We also have seen, as we're probably experiencing, single family home sales, 15% increase in median sale price, 30% decrease in housing days on market, and 50% fewer listings. It's kind of a year over year view, kind of a 3-month period here, as you see. It's the dynamics. The question is, how long are these going to last? But it's a dynamic that I know if you're trying to buy or sell a house right now, it's kind of a crazy environment to be in, which certainly from a relocation standpoint, if anybody's trying to come into the community, it's making it difficult for some of that migrant workforce to kind of come in and find properties. So I'm going to pivot now. So that's kind of just a look at, a bunch of different data to think about, what's happening. I think is the resilience piece, right? To Aaron's point, there's a couple things that just wanted to highlight. I mean, one is this collaboration between the partners that Aaron and Evan have assembled around Restore Greater Newport really provides an opportunity, I think, for that longer term, both short-term mitigation of impacts, but then that longer term strategy development. And I encourage you, we've put up a recovery dashboard that is tracking some of the core data. So I encourage you to look at that. And if you have ideas also of what you want to see tracked, I think we're certainly all ears on that. But that'll be the effort to really plan sort of what are those longer term strategies that we need to take on. I think other resilience, I think Aaron's team, and I think there are a couple of folks involved in this that are on this session, but like really this idea of late last year is this idea of Shop Greater Newport. During our planning last year, we heard from small businesses that one of the biggest needs that they had is being able to promote themselves. I think we saw that there was a lack of digital literacy in some cases, or certainly digital tools from businesses. And so the Shop Greater Newport was an opportunity and is an opportunity to really showcase those businesses. And so part of this is I'd encourage folks to think about from a resilience standpoint, I think many of us are frustrated with how strong Amazon has become over the past year. No offense to anybody working at Amazon, but I think this idea of taking local dollars out of the region and spending elsewhere is something that's concerning in terms of a long-term trend. We really need to shop more within the region and make sure that we're making a purposeful effort to do that. And so tools like Shop Greater Newport, I think, are a way to do that. Oops. We're also taking, one of the recovery dashboard items is that looking at what's happening, any kind of indicators. And so one of the things that we're excited to see is that, the bridge traffic is up 102% over this time as of, in March over the previous year. And that's even as a midpoint. So we think that's going to even be stronger, I think, as we see the year going on. Longwoods International puts out a survey that they've been doing since the beginning of the pandemic. And one of the things that struck me in this latest series, which just came out this week, is this idea of optimism and caution is kind of their keywords. It's probably maybe a little hard to see, but you see 88% as of the most recent survey, 88% of folks are thinking about traveling and planning travel within the next 6 months. A lot of that being drive type of travel, which obviously the concentration throughout the region, the larger region helps with that in the greater Newport area. And one of the things I think the caution part is, I think folks are certainly looking at and saying, 57% saying that they're only going to visit places with, unlikely to visit places without clear requirements or protocols in place. And so they want to know that the community is taking the precautions seriously, and they're searching to see what the vibe and what that experience is as they're looking for that travel planning. We're also seeing, in talking to Discover Newport, we're hearing that there's strong early start of bookings for hotels, and the calendar is filling up for post-Memorial Day reservations. Again, traveler confidence is at or near or above, even in some cases, pre-pandemic levels. And we're seeing wedding attendance growing and people getting comfortable with planning again. But there are some safety protocols still not fully understood. And I think, it's just been a shifting landscape, and I think that's part of the issue. But I think, as we all think about what the state's actions are, I think we need to make sure that those protocols are fully understood. And certainly the conference market, you're seeing the business travel, which is an important aspect, especially in the shoulder seasons in the region. We're seeing some uptick in the third and fourth quarter. Again, still with some questions around, like occupancy and sort of the density of those kinds of events that you can have. And so hopefully those will be clarified as things go on. And as we all know, right, the festivals and events, I think, starting to build confidence there. Organizers are working on health compliant events, still struggling somewhat to interpret protocols, but that's something that, I think we need to advocate for that clarity. And then there's probably this thought that most will be at 50% capacity. So we don't think that's a long-term, obviously, new normal, but obviously it's something we'll probably need to deal with over the next year. And one other area that I think as we started planning even prior to the pandemic, I think that we see as a resilience opportunity is a focus on the blue economy. For this definition, there's a couple different ways we've looked at, but this one takes out the tourism aspects of the blue economy. And you see here the region is strong in terms of in higher concentration of blue economy jobs than you see even in the state. And these jobs are in a number of different categories you see here. Some of them are related to arts, entertainment, and rec. But you see in like the professional, scientific, and technical side, a significant number of jobs in the region that are in that blue economy sector. So we estimate about 5,600 individuals and 10% of all jobs. And what we've seen is this is an area that's been growing prior to the pandemic, was growing faster than the overall economy was growing. And so we think focusing on this area makes sense as we think about the long-term economic resilience. And we also know certainly the defense sector continues to be a significant economic engine, over 29,000 jobs at the last report. Certainly there's a lot of remote work that's going on and probably will continue to go on in the industry. And one of the things we wanted to highlight, I think, in the past year, a lot of good news got overlooked, I think, in the past year, but Synedia was awarded an over $18 million contract to develop this regional workforce partnership around the next generation submarine building. And so that's over 5,000 employment opportunities that they're the lead on managing this regional workforce partnership as part of that. So we think that bodes well, again, that strength of that partnership is important as we think about resilience. And then one other area is obviously the federal interventions. I can show you a lot of other charts that we've created that show you really how the efforts of the CARES Act in the summer did mitigate some of the unemployment, some of the issues. Obviously this year we see additional significant resources being provided to the state and communities to mitigate both the health and the economic impacts. And so I know the Restore Greater Newport team is aggressively talking about the ways that that can help support the businesses and the workers and the community. And there are other competitive opportunities that are available, I think, from the economic development side, from childcare, broadband, housing, and more. It requires really, this kind of collaborative, concerted effort, public-private partnership to pursue those opportunities. And I think, obviously we see this group being pretty well aligned there. I think, as we looked at all this data, I think there's 3 areas that we see focusing on in the short term. I think one is just helping out entrepreneurs in the region regain confidence, both those that have lost their business because they just couldn't make it through the changes over the last year, and how do we help them get back in the field, think about their next opportunity or the next gig that they want to pursue. And then those that have managed to maintain, I think we need to think about a stress test for those businesses to figure out where do they need help, what's their future look like, how do we help them get stronger and regrow the jobs that they may have lost. And so those are areas I think with a strong business calling program and other activities will be important to consider. And then the broadband issues I mentioned, that's a key area. We've heard some horror stories over the past year from both a business and an education standpoint. And so that's something that through the work with Connect Greater Newport, we formed a broadband coalition that's working to try to address this issue. There are billions of dollars that the feds are going to be investing in broadband. And so we want to work on this for the region. So that's both a short-term opportunity with a long-term benefit that I think is out there for resilience. And then finally, just the workforce housing strain was an issue coming into this. The dynamics still unfolding, but I think trying to have a concerted effort about what are the number of, what's that price level that we need within the region? How do we try to work with developers in the private sector to create more workforce housing? Because that's going to be a continuing issue when you look at the economic vulnerability factors that we've seen in the data. So that's sort of the next steps for us as we think about economic resilience. And what the future holds. I think a lot of this provides us with a baseline of where are the areas that we need to focus on and some things that we need to change. I think the exciting thing is that, especially over the last month, we've seen just certainly people's attitudes change, and you're seeing that not just in the tourism confidence, but overall business confidence is starting to regain. Obviously, there's some uncertainty, but I think people are feeling comfortable that things can get back to normal. And I think people are aggressively working together to try to get to that point. And so, so I think that concludes. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have, and certainly share anything else that we've seen.
Thank you so much, Rich. If you could stop sharing the screen, I might be able to see.
That's what I was trying to do that. Actually, yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any questions? I see Liana. Just unmute yourself, please.
Okay. In the field of education, what can we be doing to help all the businesses, not only here in Newport County and Bristol County, but also throughout Rhode Island? What should we be focusing on besides the education, but the workforce and all of career pathways and so forth? What can we do to help you?
Yeah, it's a big question, right? I think the thing that in the short term, I think we're especially looking at is people that do need to transition because their business was lost. Either they're a worker or a business owner, and I think kind of this idea of doing more sort of kind of short-term training, kind of getting people back in the field. I think certainly, related also to like the Real Jobs Rhode Island program, we think that that's a strong tool to, those partnerships, and hopefully maybe some new partnerships can be formed in the future that address some of those folks that just need to pivot in terms of where they were from an occupational standpoint. I think certainly digital literacy. I mean, I think all of us have learned a lot, I think, right, over the past year. So again, it's probably more of a short-term kind of education piece, but I think these are the new tools, right? And I think no one thinks that this is going to completely go away no matter what, how well things get, right? And so I think focusing on those kind of opportunities, and then if there's credentialing or other kind of ways to certify that people have certain capacity and certain skills as a result of that is going to be important.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Mayor Napolitano.
Yeah, Rich, I was wondering if you could share that, I think it was page 15, and it was about commuting for work.
Yes.
Would you be able to share that page again?
Sure. Yeah. Test my technical skills, like I just said. So let me hold on a second.
We can also share the full presentation with everyone who
Good,
participated.
but I just wanted to get, I have a question.
but-
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to find that window now. You see my screen, right?
I see your
Yes.
screen, but yeah.
I minimized too fast there. Hold on one sec. I'm trying to find. Yeah, let me talk through it while I'm struggling to find the actual file there.
This is my question. As I looked at that screen, and I hope I understood it right. You know, we talk about workforce housing. We talk about employees that work in Newport or people that live in Newport or would like to live in Newport. Yet I saw people coming from all different areas to work in Newport. And yet these same communities probably have a lot more areas that they could develop for workforce housing. And workforce housing, I would think, would, be market rate. And we know market rate is unusually high in Newport because we have so little available housing. Plus, we're dealing with the Airbnb and a number of other platforms where people rent their houses out. I was surprised when I saw the number of people that live all over the place around Newport that are employees of Newport or in Newport.
Right.
And yet, we don't seem to have any kind of cohesive plan. Newport basically is built out.
Yeah, I think when we've talked, I appreciate that. I mean, I think the question and what's next, right, is I think thinking about this as a regional issue, right? I think especially even if you think about Newport and Bristol County, I think, because I think like the challenges, right, when you get further out, especially when you see like some of the Bristol, Mass, some of the Providence, right? I mean, some of those are decent jobs that people are coming in for, but a lot are those lower wage jobs. And I think, the strain that puts on somebody to be living pretty far away, pretty much having to have a vehicle, so it's a question of like, can you improve the transportation system to make that easier, right? Or does the region think about more workforce housing? And, I don't yet have exactly the answer of like, what does that mean in terms of like number of units? But I do hear your point. I think that certain communities are built out, right? And I think, so the question is, where can we, if we think about it as a region, which communities can potentially, support more of that workforce? Because I think it is going to be a longer term challenge we've already seen it anecdotally from recruitment from existing employers in the region that have expressed, difficulties in recruiting new talent because people don't want to live that far out. They're looking for something more closer to their job. So I guess like the short answer, it's complicated in terms of, right, you have to think about where's that housing going to be built, right? What's the transportation system? And then obviously, what do those job levels look like so that people can afford whatever that, what is being built. So somehow I think we need to think about all those as part of the equation as we go forward.
Okay, thank you.
And that's just my opinion. So in case anybody else has, you may disagree.
Bill DeWitt had a question.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, in your presentation, you talked about workforce housing. In the General Assembly and statewide, there's a lot of conversation about affordable housing. Should we look at those topics together? Are they better tackled separately? How should we address what is really, a complicated topic that I think on many communities, kind of the General Assembly has forced a one-size-fit-all requirement?
Yeah, yeah, and some of that gets political pretty fast, right? In terms of how you define those things, both big P, small p, I guess. I think the question is right. I think certainly around the country, you're seeing a lot of focus on even that 30 to 80% AMI level, which I can show you what those numbers look like. But I think because that's really where I think from the workforce standpoint, I mean, those are the kind of the essential workers that we've relied upon in this last year are pretty much in that bandwidth. They're the people that are, supporting the tourism, hospitality, retail industries. And so I think there is this, I think there is this open question about, looking at that band as an additional, and there's a couple different ways that people are describing it above affordable, right? But I think, I think there's got to be some focus on that band at least to try to make some sense of what we need to figure out be built in the region. I don't know if that fully answers, but I think we need to have that dialogue about making sure that those definitions, are clear. And when we're targeting, again, based on wage rates, we're targeting a band that makes sense for the region.
Thank you.
Glenn Almquist.
Hey, Rich, thank you. That was a great summary. A lot of information there to look at quickly. So I would appreciate posting that presentation. We could take a look at it. A question I have is related to the child care issue. It looked like there was a huge gap between availability and need. I'm trying to understand if there's it's probably a combination of factors, but is it an availability issue so that there aren't enough daycare facilities for people who will want them, or is the cost high enough that the people who need the service can't afford to use it?
Yeah, I mean, this is an area that in a couple of our markets that my team works, I think what's been exposed in the last year is that the financials of operating a childcare center don't work, right? Like that, they were built on an operating model and very thin profit margins, if at all, in most cases, right? And so you had this economic shock and health shock happen, and many were immediately bankrupt, right? They just couldn't, and some of them luckily were able to benefit from different programs. I think what we're seeing is a lot of business associations, some other chambers are really taking a more aggressive look at like, how do we think about what's an employer's role in thinking about childcare as a benefit, or their role in even supporting across employers, supporting the sponsorship of childcare seats to make those numbers work better for childcare centers. I mean, the exact model, I don't think anybody's had the best practice. I mean, there are a couple regions around the country we've seen have some exceptional growth in their slots of childcare through some aggressive either tax credits or other things. But I think that's an area that I think we're dealing, like, we've got to think about that. And certainly it's a statewide issue, right? If not it's a national issue. And so I think we need to think about how do we treat childcare as an essential worker support going forward, because, at some point, these same communities are going to be complaining they can't find enough workforce, but you have people that can't get into the workforce because they need childcare support. And so we've got to have that discussion, I think.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you.
I think Joe Nicholson, did you have a question?
Always, Aaron. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. It was wonderful. Broadband, you mentioned tackling the broadband issue. I'd like to know, at least from your opinion, what do you see those next steps looking like? I'll just anecdotally add that it's a good time to tackle the issue because local government, at least within the context of the stimulus money that we're getting through direct aid and perhaps with the county money, at least it's clear as to what type of infrastructure uses that those funds can be put to. And then, of course, if you superimpose the president's potential infrastructure plan, it looks like it's going to be a big concentration on that. And so the dollars may be there to get not only through the short term, but through the long term on this. But what do you see the next couple of steps on this being? I have this conversation probably weekly with Sean Brown out in Middletown, and I think I can speak for him on it, that we're we're very intrigued by it. And so how do you see this rolling out?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Absolutely. I think there's, I mean, we see the opportunity. I think, so there's a couple pieces. I mean, one is, I think, Connect Greater Newport, the Newport County Development Council has received investment from the Van Buren Charitable Foundation to really pull together a coalition and to basically develop an RFP, which we're looking to release in the next week or two, to bring in a vendor to basically help us get better about the mapping and sort of where the gaps are, and then looking at a feasibility, basically creating a shovel-ready project or projects. Probably different approaches probably are going to be needed. But you know, as you know, we've identified some of the issues, but we need to better understand the scale and like pockets of where exactly to be able to then say, like, with the funding that's available, this is exactly how we can solve the problem here or there, you know, elsewhere in the area. And so so I mean, I think that process then to get somebody on board, I think we think that kind of shovel ready approach can be ready in the next 2 to 3 months, basically, because we have a lot of, you know, as you know, we were surveying right before the pandemic hit. We did a lot of business surveying and identifying some of the issues. Now it's just packaging that into like, what's the proposal basically that can get submitted to draw in some of that funding to actually alleviate the issue.
Thanks, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? I think we're good. Oh, Isabel?
Hi, hey, Rich. A quick question about the blue economy jobs, because that's such a huge category. Are there a few examples that you could share and maybe some, you know, wins, some things that look really positive?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we've seen some, you know, certainly we've seen some growth in like the composites industry in the last couple of years. We think that's an area, obviously, as I mentioned, a lot related to defense and sort of the unmanned, you know, systems on the water, right? And then obviously the wind play too. I think the offshore wind, obviously that's something that the state has been identified in the state's plan. We think certainly the region can benefit from that growth, and especially, I mean, we'll see if this infrastructure plan gets support, but you know, there's even more of that, right? That's expected even beyond what we had thought about when we were starting to look at this. And so I think, yeah, and there's things like even like 401 Tech Bridge and other assets that have come online in the last year that all lend themselves into that blue economy piece that, we think we have enough assets to build on that. And again, we've seen growth, like I said, in the sectors that we already have. So. And the only other thing I should add on that is one of the areas that we're focused on is really the blue collar kind of blue economy job, because I think like that manufacturing, the trades, you know, those kind of pieces, and partnering with like University of Rhode Island is doing a lot on the innovation side of blue economy. I think we see that play even from a worker pivoting from, you know, again, some retail or hospitality that they may no longer be able to go back to. We're trying to identify the crosswalk to pivot into the blue collar, blue economy jobs for those people that may not need a higher degree, more of a certification type of program and things like that.
Great, thank you.
Cool.
So thank you all for joining us. Thanks so much, Rich, for that presentation. We will absolutely share it with everybody who's registered today, and certainly with our counterparts within the different municipalities, our Connect Greater Newport stakeholders, and our legislators in the region as well. I want to thank you all for taking the time. This is really important information, and the work that Fourth Economy has done and my partners at Restore Greater Newport to collect this data is really, the only place that I know of that's actually collecting the data and reporting out on it in real time. So I encourage you to take a look at our website, Restore Greater Newport. We add new points and new data tracks on a monthly basis. I mean, it's really helping us guide, attitude and our planning and strategy for how we need to move forward. So if anybody has any questions about it at any time or additional points that we should be tracking, we're open to that kind of information. But I can't thank you all enough. It has been a long year. We all know that, but we can see, that we are starting to recover. It will take a few years, for us to get back to where we want to be, but even more so where we should be. So we want to rebuild the industry sector that has been most adversely hurt, but also continue to build up those other sectors that are more resilient in this type of situation. We don't want any of this to happen again, but it may. So we need to be in a good position and have a nice, robust, healthy, versatile economy so that we can ensure that we bounce back from these types of issues quicker. So thank you all again for joining us. We'll have the presentation shortly. And as always, reach out to us at the chamber if you have any questions. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Erin. Thanks for